Okay, hello everyone. This afternoon we will be discussing about uh, the continuation part of chapter 2, and we will proceed straight to chapter 3, hopefully, if we can finish that off this afternoon. So I would like to share with you guys um, my screen. Okay, it has, hold a sec. All right. Hiduki. Okay. So we ended last time discussing about what are the personal characteristics that basically determines and affect people's behavior in an organization, which is your ability, your intelligence, your personal traits, emotions, emotional intelligence, and so with your attitude. We discuss as well that when you talk about ability, this is the quality that you possess. It's either you have more of the ability for spatial, which is more of, like mechanical abilities, perceptual memory, are so good with memorizing. And so with the another one is maybe numerical or memory. All right. So it's more on there are people who are so good in mathematics that are not good in English, or so good with mechanical kind of thing, but they are poor in academics, something like that. Intelligence talks about the capacity, how you will resolve issues, uh, the way how you mold your principles and, like perceive, uh, say, things, inferences. Okay, your personality, it's all about psychological um qualifications, psychological qualities of an individual. Your attitude, it's basically, these are traits, okay, that are less stable, and it can change. Your attitude will change based on the different kinds of experiences that you gained, okay, or influence from different types of people. And basically within every organization, this can be affected by, say, for example, cultural differences, norms, values, behavioral management of an organization. Say, for example, your attitude before when you were with the, like, European and American people, you have different sets of attitude. But when you transfer after 5 years, you transfer to another group of companies, for example, your attitude has, changed. Say if you're into Asians, or, like, or Arabs. So like, attitude is not really that uh constant. It may change um mm, the management styles, or maybe policies set forth by the organization that influence, like reference group, okay, with whom the people identify. When it comes to emotions, it's also like any kind of feelings that will come out by every individual. And basically, emotions will definitely affect the behavior of anyone. Say, for example, you have an emotion of anger, fear, sadness, okay, joy, anticipation, and acceptance in such a way that it will, reflect the way you dispose your behavior. Say if you're angry, okay, for example, whenever you are in the state of that emotion, the way how you behave is different. So it should go hand in hand. All right. These are low intensity, long lasting emotional states. When it comes to the point that your anger will become in a longer state, okay, then there will be a problem with your anger management. Okay. So because it will affect your behavior. The notion of emotional intelligence was defined first by Solovey and Mayer, that they said we those who proposed that it involves the capacity to perceive emotion, meaning to say emotional intelligence is, so you are so good with gut feeling. You can read people, you can feel them, even if they're not talking. You can sense. It's like discernment in spiritual perspective. Okay. Integrate. You're so smart about, like feeling with people, feeling people, something like that. Like integrate emotion in thought, understand emotion, and manage emotions effectively. So emotional intelligence will also defined as the capacity of recognizing your own feelings and that of others, and for motivating ourselves, for managing emotions well in ourselves as well as others. Now, in work organization and job design, all right, um, this like this is all about the structure of the organization that depends on, how each and every, like part of this are closely related when it comes to, processes, procedures that has been established in within the organization and how things are done. When you talk about work design, it deals with the ways in which things are done in the work system of a business by teams and individuals. In other words, it's the same way as, how things are being done in ABC company compared to Al-Ali. All right. Now, the organization, there are three things that you need to understand. Work is the way, the process. Organization design is concerned with deciding how organization should be structured. The organization design is either what and who will be the head of office, how you design organization design, how you arrange. Okay. Work is the way of how you're doing things, how you're doing things. Organization design is the way how you draw things. All right. Um, how you design everything. Okay. How you organize. Okay. From the word organize. Job design is about establishing what people in individual jobs or role are there to do. Say, for example, in an organization, you structurize your the structural form of the whole organization from the organizational design was you will be naming the head of office as, say, for example, not general manager. You will just put it as the deputy MD or MD, all right? Or operations manager. That's the way how you structurize your organization. That's the way how you design your organization. The operations manager in other parts of the world or any other company, they call that operations manager as general manager. That you called organization design. All right. The people who are working in there, each of them has their own job design. All right. You establish what people in individual jobs or role are there to do, although these three activities are dealt with separately in this section. They share only one purpose, and that is to ensure that the organization, that your company work system and structure, they are operating effectively and efficiently and make the best use of people in their jobs, in their role, and take account of the needs of the people at work. Now, we're finished already with the design. Let's go straight to the so-called system. Okay. Work, organization, job. We talk about design. Finished. Okay. How about system? We have work system, organization system, and job system. Now, to achieve that purpose, because our purpose is to ensure that the organization will have an effective and efficient structure that will operate in the best way you can utilize your employees. Um, Making sure that that will be in accordance with the, people's needs. Okay. So how about with the system? To achieve the purpose, work, organization, and job design functions sequentially, meaning to say they cannot overlap each other. There's always a step by step, meaning to say it's strategic. The work system is designed to meet the specific needs of the business and to deliver value to its customers or clients. An organization structure, or the so-called system, all right? Not all organizations are rigidly structured to be established or developed to enable the work system to operate. Not everything. So you will sense in that face that whenever there is no system in the organization, uh, there is no continuity of business operations. If there is no system, there will be an overlapping of principles and power and authority within the organization. Now, since we need to develop and enable the work system to operate, the structure is made up of jobs or roles. You know, what are your basically what are the rules that have to be designed and in a ways that will maximize the extent to which they can be carried out effectively and provide intrinsic motivation that is, like when you are motivated by the work itself. It's not that of course, because work is processes, all right? Now, in work design, okay, talking about work design, this is the creation of the system of work and working environment that enhance organizational effectiveness and productivity. All right. Now, how you will do that, you need to ensure that the organization becomes, like favorable, conducive environment to work for the employee. You need to take an extra effort in order for you guys that everyone will be happy, everyone is comfortable to be working in that working environment. You are thinking about the well-being of the employees. That's why you need to make sure that the work design is or probably involves the exertion of efforts and the application knowledge and skills in order for you guys that you know you will attain whatever vision, mission, and goal that you set in place. Now, systems of work. Now we are talking about work. Now, what are the systems of work? These are the combined processes, methods, um, say techniques used to get the work done, or systems of work. This is what you call, you know, step one, step two. These are the procedures. Okay, it's just like in your science investigatory project. In order for you to find out what's the conclusion, you need to do step one. You need to do the procedure. So systems of work is just the way how that operates in the organization. The work environment comprises the design of the jobs, working condition, and the ways in which the design itself is closely associated with the organization. And the job design in that latter is conducted in the context of system and work environment. Now, in that system itself, when you talk about system, this is a set of design, okay, practices. No, sorry. The system is a set of practices and activities that fit together, okay? Sistema, uh, like task or activities, okay? A set of practices or activities that fit together and interact in order to achieve a purpose. Those are system. Where if you're going to keep all that terminology joined together, we have work, we have system design, that so-called work system design. This is now concerned with how those processes being designed, all right? How those various processes required to make a product or provide customer needs and what the needs or wants of the customer. The structure of the system describe the relation between the different operations because work is exertions of effort, system is a set of processes, and when you talk about design, it's concerned about deciding how your organization works or how you're gonna structure the organization. So if all these things, are combined together, it will give you a result of what really the customer, the client, the employees wanted to. Now, organizational design, talking about organizational design, okay, this is the process of deciding how the organization should be structured in terms of ways in which the responsibility can be carried out and allocated by the individual, allocated to every member of the organization, groups of people, how you are going to carry out in order, again, to make sure that those people working with you can work effectively okay, together in order to achieve that common goal and purpose within the organization. So those are the meaning of those words. Now let's go straight to design. Now, job design specify the content of job in order to satisfy the work requirements and meet the personal needs of the job holder. Thus, you need to increase the level of employee engagement. Why? It's because the job design, okay, is the function in an organization where you need to identify how these people will work in order to satisfy the employee, how to provide conducive uh, working condition and so on. A distinctive can be made between jobs and role. Now, the role, like, what's your role? Like my role is, like I am, uh, my job role is being a secretary, for example. So when you talk about a job, this is an organizational unit consisting of the group of defined tasks or activities to be carried out or duties to be performed. Your role is the part played by individual and others of behavior expected of them in fulfilling their job work requirements. When you talk about job, those are your tasks. But when you talk about role, that is all about people. Now, if people will ask you, what's your job? Okay, what's your job? You cannot say like, I'm a secretary, I'm an engineer. You cannot say like that. The question is job. And when you talk about job, it talks about the task. So if people will say, what's your job? Uh, I, I answer telephone calls. I usually call clients for a sales call. I do minutes of the meeting. I do like this and that. You are telling them your job description because that is role. That's the definition of role. And that's the definition of job. Okay. But when people will ask, what's your role? So even yourself, if you wanted to know what kind of profession your friends or whoever will tell you, okay, or you will commune, if you want the position name, you need to ask, what's your role? What's your role in the company? Okay, what's the role? What's your role in the company? I am an engineer. I am an IT. I am a general manager. Okay, so that's now you got that idea. Now the 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 distinction between these two, okay, it may be designed to fit work requirements. Roles are developed as people work flexibly and demonstrate that they can do more um, and take on more responsibility. So if you are doing all your job, okay, in the office, then that job, if that is perfectly done, there is a possibility that your role will be promoted. You understand now how you will construct sentences now. So the role development, okay, your role development happens informally in contrast to the form for more formal approaches to job design. Now, there are types of approaches, popular approaches, and common things in job design. Talking about job design, job rotation, job enlargement, job enrichment are popular approaches to job design. They're under job design. When you talk about job rotation, these are all improvements of the employees from one task to another to reduce monotony by increasing variety. Job rotation purposely not to just, let you know that there's only one job in the organization. This is jack of all trade. Rotation in the morning, you will be cashier, you will open the store. At exactly 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, you will be a cashier. And then the last 4 hours of your work, you will be merchandiser. Okay. So in a day, you can be, all functions in the organization. That is job rotation. What's the purpose why there's a job rotation? That you can cover up, you can stand in on behalf of someone who, for whatever reasons, like in a day, you don't know who will be leaving. Okay. Job enlargement, this means combining previously fragmented tasks into one job, and again to increase the variety and meaning of repetitive work. It's just like uh, you will be given task differently. Like you can be job enlargement, you can be at the same time, you can be operator, reception, customer service, secretary, admin, document controller, all at once. That is job enlargement. Usually, what happened during job enlargement is when there's a lot of people leaving the company without replacing them. So there's a tendency that you will do job enlargement. One position, one person, you're handling three or four role. Okay. All right. Multiple job task. Job enrichment, this goes beyond job enlargement to add greater autonomy and responsibility to a job. All right. Job enrichment is that it requires higher, higher autonomy, higher position, higher responsibility. All right. Now, job enrichment, we aim to maximize the interest and challenge of, you know, work by providing that the employee with a job has three basic characteristics. So, what are the three basic characteristics of job enrichment? It is a complete piece of work in the sense that the worker can identify a series of tasks or activities that end in a recognizable and definable product. We have it affords the employees as well in job enlargement, enrichment. Why we need to do that? Why we need to put more of, because of course, if you guys are extra performer, you are sharp and you are fast learner, the management will have that kind of decision making responsibility and control. Who are those people that can carry greater responsibility at work? Now it provides direct feedback to the work itself on how well the employee is doing his or her job. Now in the organizational development, um this is a systematic approach to improving organizational capability, meaning to say, if all the employees can are competent enough, okay, they are competent to do the job, meaning to say the organizational capability of this organization is high. Therefore, this this company will be a highly developed, like highly developed in a sense that, it starts with people, the quality of people, how you structure everything in there. Now, how things to get done. If this is a system approach to improving organizational capability, which is concerned with the process and how things get done, then uh, the organizational development will operate a system-wide process of data collection, diagnosis, action planning, intervention, and evaluation. Now, what's the nature of organizational development? The nature of organizational development, we use this to provide a specialized consultant tended to practice as a mystery with HR playing supporting role, and if it played any role at all, but there is a close relationship between the human resource management and organizational development. Now, when you talk about organizational development, this is one of the most effective tool in order for you guys to promote a successful change in the organizational development. Now, as you all know, HR is evolving, all right? We are increasing focuses on building organizational setups like learning, skills, workforce productivity. The effective use of the organizational development is to help achieve company business goals and strategies, in which right now it's becoming a broad competency in human resource as well as in the key strategic human resource development, right? Now, how we are going to reach that? It should be that purpose of the organizational development, we need to increase an organizational effectiveness, how you will develop if all the policies, all the things that you are doing are not effective. So through the planned interventions related to the organization processes, we need to do the result, we need to make sure that the organizational processes will be resulting in improvement in productivity, return of investment, and employee satisfaction. These are only the basic mission of the human resource practitioner, why we need to have an office in organizational development, what are their purposes, to improve productivity, to make ROI high and employee satisfaction. Now, organizational development strategy in order to develop that organization, these are founded on the aspiration to improve organizational capability, which is broadly the capacity of the organization to function effectively. In order for every people uh, to achieve the desired results of those mission, vision, and goal. It has been defined more specifically as the ability to manage people for a competitive advantage. That is organizational development strategy. There can you can hear the word uh, do not work hard but work smart. Okay, so those are the things that usually you know we are hearing most of the time. Now, what is organizational diagnosis? Now, if you are in a company, okay, if you have organizational development office, um, usually we used to, like analyze and diagnose issues, problems, okay, any kind of circumstances within the organization in a very strategic, operational, and like practical, okay, processes and issues that are affecting the organization and its ability to perform well. So that is organizational diagnosis. And an organizational diagnosis, this is a systematic process of gathering data about business or organization, the problem, challenges, strengths, and the limitations in analyzing how such factors influence its ability to interact effectively and profitability with the business environment. Now, most of the uh, content content of the organizational development activities in which this page is so helpful for you guys that when you try to set up kind of organization, just like those who doesn't have any on any human resource office, you can start doing this. All right, you can start uh thinking about how you are going to develop your company based on the practical abilities, like what are the activities of the or OD, organization development. You do engagement training, okay, uh, through learning and training, the development of improved levels of jobs and organizational engagement. Our objective here is to ensure that people are committed to their work and the organization and motivated to achieve their levels of performance. So if you want people to get engaged, you need to make sure that there is a participative, uh interactive role or activity set by the human resource. High performance working, developing a work system processes and practices and policies to enable employees to perform to their full potential. Impact on the performance of the organization through its people, such as productivity, quality, level of customer service, growth, and profits. Knowledge management is the way how you will store and share the wisdom, understanding, and expertise accumulated in the organization about its process, techniques, and operations. If you are working in the factory and you are for 5 years, there's a lot of ways how to manage things. So those are knowledge management, organizational learning, that is the acquisition and development of knowledge, okay? Understanding insights, techniques, and practices. to facilitate performance and improvement and major changes in strategic direction. Organizational design is all about the process of deciding how the organization should be structured in terms of the ways in which the responsibility of carrying out the overall task is basically allocated to individuals and groups of people, and how the relationship between each other functions. Performance management, which is advisable that there always be a systematic process involving the agreement of performance, expectations, and the review of how the employees are, performing well and how expectations have been met. And smart working, this should be an approach to arguing work that through a combination of flexibility, autonomy, and collaboration in parallel will optimizing tools and working governments for employees. So these are the organizational activities that you can copy paste uh when you started you know organization or organizing people within the organization. Just hold. Now we finished already chapter 2. Hold on. Just hold. Now we hope to move forward to chapter 3. Just hold. Okay, now we will be uh, discussing employee behavior in our organization. What I'm telling you guys is this is the best topic that I really love to do, and I really love to share with you because there are a lot of things that you will be learning more about people. Now, when you talk about employee behavior in our organization, there are a lot of bad attitude or problem behavior in an office environment where there are poor quality of work. There are like whatever work assignment you gave to them, there are poor quantity, okay, of the output, productivity, the absenteeism, not following rules and policies within the organization. They're not even cooperative. They are very defensive, excuse making, overly sensitive. Okay. Like when there is a problem in the office environment, my God, they will not run out of reasons, you know. So there are disparages the organization at work, avoids work, okay, and foments dissatisfaction, okay, among employees. Those are behavior in an organization. Now, talking about factors, what are the factors that affects employee behavior? Now, in order for you guys to really understand, okay, the need to take account, okay, what are the general factors that affect how people behave at work, if you remember, if that will be from ability, for your intellect, your emotions, your intelligence, your emotions, personality, your emotional intelligence. We need to be aware as well that there are three specific factors that affect behavior. If those five affects the behavior, the way how people behave, okay? Now, there are also three specific factors that influence behavior and also affects performance in the working environment. We need to go for motivation, commitment, and engagement. Now, those are the factors. That means that if a person is motivated to come to office, there is no way that motivation factor that he or she has will not make him or her committed to his job, right? To his role. If a person is committed to his role, to the company, uh, to the position that he is, working, then that means that there is no engagement if you are not committed. But if the other way around, these three factors will go hand in hand. High motivation results to commitment and engagement. First section of the book, we will be tackling chapter uh, where we will discuss concept of motivation. The next one is talking about commitment, and the final section of the chapter for chapter 3, we will be discussing engagement, which this is a situation of which people are committed to their work and the organization are motivated to achieve high levels of performance. All right. People are committed to do their job because that's the way how they wanted to, and the way how you will organize. Now, in there are also theories in chapter 3 that could possibly help us to understand why people are motivated. What motivates people? What motivates people is all about motivational drive that makes people motivated. So motivational drive, all of us, that's our, it's already inborn among human beings. Say Filipinos, you have a lot of problems. However, you're still happy and smiling. There's already a huge flood in Metro Manila, but you make those water, those streets like a river, and you are swimming there. Okay? See the kind of thing. Because what motivates people talks about your content theories. When you talk about content theories, it assumes that human beings have an innate package of motives, needs, or desired outcomes which they take action to pursue. That means that in the Maslow hierarchy of needs, all right, Herzberg's two-factor theory, there are two of the most important approaches of this type. And McClelland work on high achievements offers an interesting sideline on pay and motivation. Now, if what motivates people answer and talks about content theory, okay, our package of motives, there's also question that answerable by a process theories. How are people motivated? So when you talk about uh, when you ask what motivates people, that is very subjective. But when you are asked how are people motivated, it requires you of, confirming what are the deliverables that you need to do in order for you to be, contented. Now, the process theory, this explore the psychological process through which outcomes become desirable and are pursued by individuals. Saying, for example, this kind of approach assumes that people are able to select their goals and choose the path towards them, and by conscious or unconscious process of calculation. In the process theory, there's always how are people motivated. You will be motivated if you know your, like price or reward after that. So it's all about expectancy theory, right? So how people are motivated, it's like if you finish reading 1 to 100 pages, I will be, like I will be rewarded. I am expecting that you will do something for me. So this process theory assumes that there is a psychological process that creates motivation. The need theories of motivation, Maslow hierarchy, Herbert suggests that the intrinsic rewards as well as extrinsic rewards must be included in the reward category or reward strategy when it talks about intrinsic rewards and extrinsic rewards. There are a lot of variety of discussion on this. Now, the need theory suggests that individuals have a certain innate needs. How people are motivated when you're going to satisfy whatever the need of the person. Okay? Now, we suggest that the need theories, okay, individuals have certain innate needs when a need is unsatisfied. The individual experience or mind is tension and acts in pursuit of the goal that will satisfy the need. You understand that? Like in any cases, you are really desiring to be like in grade, say, four, say grade five, because you are in grade four now. You really desire to be in grade five, and there's a lot of steps to complete before you will reach grade five, for example. Now, every time that you are not getting that grade five, okay, you are you're working a lot of things, like there's pressure, tension, okay, because you wanted to work so much, you need to do overtime, you need to tumbling here and there, because there is an act in pursuit to accomplish that particular goal in order to satisfy your need. You understand? Now, Abraham Maslow, 1954, developed an original most famous need theory. He argued that human beings have five innate needs, which he suggested could be arranged in a hierarchy of relative prepotency. I remember Maslow hierarchy of needs way back when still I was in grade five. There is a physiological needs down there because our basic need is only food, shelter, and sleep. Okay, clothing. Okay, food, shelter, and clothing. As long as there's a roof at the top of our head, we are contented with that. Okay, we're still dependent on our parents. When we graduate in university, we have that safety needs. Okay, for security, order, predictability, freedom from threat. I need to secure work. When you have a work, you work already in any corporation, you are driving your car, okay? You are sad, you are alone. So you need to feel that social needs, okay? Feeling of belongingness. So you need someone to call on your own. So you will get married. After getting married, you will have a baby and all. The need arises again for independence, recognition, status, respect, and others. You have already a family. I want to be big mutir because I want to gain more, you know, uh, salary or position until such time that you will reach to the growth and fulfillment of personal potential, which is self-actualization. But mind you, whatever, whoever those people that are in on that stage of self-actualization, what could satisfy them, what could make them contented is, what the physiological needs level has, reached of. Say, for example, in physiological needs, there are a lot of time. They do have a lot of, affection because they are just, all of them are there. That is what the self-actualization desire in that level. So, see the irony of life? It's like that. Whatever we have a lot of money, but we don't have love, then alas, it seems that it doesn't make sense all. All right. Now there are two-factor theory in the management. All right. Um, okay. Maybe I need to make sure that The Frederick Herbert Show of 1966 interviewed Pitchfork engineers and accountants about critical incidents, which made them feel good and bad about their work. Okay. He identified there are two basic needs categories of individuals at work. What are those basic? We have the so-called hygiene and the motivator, the need to avoid unpleasant associated with fair treatment in compensation, uh, supervision, working conditions, and administrative practices. These needs are satisfied by what Herbert called hygiene theory because they may minimize dissatisfaction and poor job performance. When you talk about hygiene performance, you don't want that your employees has something to do with you. You need to provide everything what they need because they want clean cat performance. They have little ability to motivate the individual to higher levels of job or of job satisfactions or extra performance. Hygiene factor are motivated by individual, essentially extrinsic rewards deriving from factors in the environment or content of work and offering satisfaction of lower level needs. All right. Now, the need to develop in one's occupation, that is hygiene factor. And we derive for the extrinsic in order for them to be satisfied, you need extrinsic rewards. So the need to develop in one's occupation as a source of personal growth associated with factors such as advancement, recognition, responsibility, challenge, and achievement. These needs are satisfied by what Herbert called motivator. All right. So if there is, someone who are really in need of particular things, we need to develop as well a kind of, like factor to motivate people, which are seen to be effective in motivating the individual to more positive, greater attitude. It has been said here, we will end in the slides, okay? We will after a couple of hours, I'll be because it's a charge time. After a couple of hours, I will continue another an hour of discussion. So on say on tomorrow, like 6 to 8, you will be receiving two links of discussion. First 1 hour and second will be another an hour. It says here that a satisfied worker is not necessarily high producer, and a high producer is not necessarily a satisfied worker. What does it mean? Okay. There are a lot of people in our organization where, to be honest, they are not happy worker. They are not satisfied worker. They are just there because they don't have a choice. But when it comes to work, they work. They are high producer because that is really it's an innate, natural born hard worker person. Okay. There and it's not necessarily that a high producer, those people who produce so much, who are working so hard and like uh, very diligent at work, they are satisfied. Okay. There, I will give you an example, an illustration. People at work, they are getting salary of 10,000. They're very satisfied, but they don't do anything. Okay. They will just come to office, take a rug, okay, pray 5 times in a day, take coffee, go out, whatever, smoke here and there. The number of hours they get themselves involved when it comes to work is very less. You are going to do the cross benefit, the ROI calculation for that position, they fail. They are satisfied worker is because they have a lot of salary. They're receiving huge amount of salary, but not necessarily they high producer. They don't do in a day, they're just sitting there doing nothing. There are people who are miskin, yani, okay? Asian, all right? They are high producer, but wallahi, they're not happy to be in that company. They are not satisfied worker. All right. And the McClelland achievement motivation theory, it discusses about four Maslow self-actualization, esteem, and love needs that McClelland identified four main needs-based motives based on achievement, power, affiliation, and avoidance. And there is also a Vroom expectancy theory, basically states that the strength of an individual motivation to do something will influenced by the perceived link between individual effort, performance, and particular outcome. Meaning to say, if this is what I am doing today, I will finish all the bank statement, meaning to say my performance is good, and in return, you will see that I'm doing my job, you will, increase my salary. That is perception, based on perception between those individual efforts, performance, and particular outcome. Now, the importance of those outcomes to the individual will be the reward, make the effort worthwhile. You will ask yourself, in the perceived link between individual effort, performance, and particular outcomes, you will ask, will reward follow effort? Say, if I will tell now, okay, those of you who can sign up a contract in the next 3 months worth 300,000, I will give you bonus of 10,000 Qatar riyal. After saying that, is the effort, the action will follow. In the other way around, will the reward make the effort worthwhile? People will say, if you do this, voila, I will increase your salary, but you do not know how much. Employee of the month, your face is being posted in the bulletin board, but, and you work hard because you want to be an employee of the month. But the question is, will the reward make the effort worthwhile? You don't have sleepless night, you'll go always overtime. Then end of the day, you will just receive a piece of paper, congratulations, due to exigency of service. You are awarded as only paper yani, MAPI QAR. Okay. So the suggested formula by which motivation could be assessed and measured based on that is all about expectancy theory. When you talk about valence, it's represented by positive or negative number or zero, since the outcomes or rewards may be desired, avoided, or considered with difference. Why it's represented by a negative number or zero? Because nobody knows. All right. Nobody knows whether you'll be rewarded or not. Expectancy express probability in the perception of the individual's number between 0 and 1. Expectancy in a way, because in the office, if you work so hard, it's either you will get or you will not get. Okay? Well, I don't care as long as I'll do my job. If they will give me promotion, good. If that is fine with me, something like that. So for example, in here, force or strength of motivational to do is equal to the valence or the strength of the individual preference to outcome. Okay. You are motivating yourself because you know there is something in return. An expectancy, you need to do it because there is something good really. All right. So if you're going to take that as an example, an employee may have a high expectation that behavior X, say increase in productivity, will result in outcome like promotion. Because of the performance contract, perhaps, this individual, however, she is indifferent that outcome because she doesn't want the responsibility. He knows the outcome. Okay, I will have like 500 salary increase, but how many nights I will be on time? I cannot go home late. I cannot go home early. I will always be late. The number of hours that I'll be working with that 500 worth it? Okay, something like that. Exactly, this is what the valence, expectancy, and force equation means. This model will help to explain why performance incentive and rewards work most effectively. The rewards and incentive can only be positive if you know exactly, clean cut, black and white, the link between effort and reward. Intended results and goals are made clear, and the reward is perceived to be worth the effort. Like, even if I'll do tumbling here and then, I don't care because I know that at the end of the day, I know I'll be given a fair share. All right. So this is just similar when the employee has a great desire for promotion. For example, I really wanted to be promoted, but doesn't believe that more productive behavior, if I will be kind and good and, you know, like excellent, okay, in the office, I can secure post. Say because, okay, she has been passed over previously, the expectancy is equal to zero, she will not still be highly motivated because, like she doesn't want to play productive behavior. All right. Now, we all know that participation and involvement in this case always suggested that workforce motivation will be enhanced by involvement in decision affecting worker and the work. So this concept runs alongside and complements political ideas about industrial democracy and, of course, the role of the trade unions. Okay, what's the role of the trade unions? Um, all this model, performance incentive and rewards, there's only one thing that equates everything. Pay is the greatest motivator. Pay as a motivator. Monetary reward has a central but ambiguous role in motivation theory. Pay is not mentioned explicitly in any need list, but clearly it can allow or support the satisfaction of various needs. All right? There are various needs that we really, like desire to. There's also word that so-called commitment. So I will be discussing with you guys uh commitment. Now, one of the main traits of modern human resource policy is, like the way how you inspire people in the organization, that is commitment. It will represent strength of individuals and identification and involvement in an organization. This concept is very important part in the human resource philosophy because when you talk about commitment, it talks about attachment and loyalty of every employee to the organization. According to Modi of 1998, it stated that it is a it is characterized by an emotional attachment to one's organization that results from shared values and interests. There are three characteristics identified by Modi: a strong desire to remain a member of the organization. There is a strong belief in the acceptance and values and goals of the organization and readiness to exert considerable effort on behalf of the organization. There are also factors that affects commitment. According to Kushan and Dyer of 1993, the factors affecting the level of commitment is what you call mutual commitment firms. Where as follows, what are those mutual commitment firms that could be identified that affects commitment? Strategic level, supportive business strategy, staff management, value commitment, and effective voice for HR in strategy making and governance. Strategically, in that level, do you have it? Functional, human resource policy, do you have it? Staffing based on the employment stabilization, investment, processes, procedure, rules when it comes to training, development, and contingent compensation that reinforce cooperation, participation, and contribution. In the workplace level, okay, strategic level, functional, and workplace level, what are the factors that affect commitment there in the workplace level? Maybe selection based on the high standards, or maybe broad design and teamwork, employee involvement in problem solving, and high climate of cooperation and trust. All right. So those are the things that basically affects. All right. Now, there are a lot of developing strategies for commitment. Now, the human resource should play a major part in developing a high commitment organization. You need to be communicating that there should be an emphasis to management that commitment is a two-way process. I will work for you so much more than how many hours that you require me, but please, in return, I am expecting that if I am committed, you, the management, are also committed for delivering and demonstrating uh, favorable rewards to the employee. Impress on management the need to develop a climate of trust and positive psychological contract. You will develop a positive psychological contract where this is a set of reciprocal but unwritten expectation that exists at individual employees. When you talk about positive psychological contract, um, you rely on consensus and cooperation rather than control and coercion. Advise the establishment of partnership agreement. There are companies that, like they will make employees who render services for more than 10 years to be, like a contributory part of the management, like a stakeholder for 5 shares and so on. Recommend and take part of the achievement single status. You can encourage management to declare a policy of employment security, develop performance management processes, and advise on means of increasing employee satisfaction. These are the things that, you let people stick to the organization. These 10 strategy are helpful as well. Enhance employee job engagement to identify employees with the job they are doing. Now, when you talk about job engagement, it will take place only when people are committed to their work and the organization and are motivated to achieve high levels of performance. Managers should supposedly attracted, okay, to the concept because the idea of having an engaged employees and dislike the prospect of having disengaged employees are so worthwhile. The meaning of employee engagement, we have, according to Alphys et al. Of 2010, there's intellectual engagement, affective, social engagement. You are thinking hard about the job and how to do it better. That is intellectual. Feeling positive about doing the job, that is effective. You're getting affected by the organization. And social engagement, you are actively taking opportunities to discuss work and improvements with other colleagues, okay, at work. Okay, that is social engagement. Those are the classes of engagement in the organization, right? Now, the term engagement can be used in a specific job related way to describe that what takes place when people are interested in and positive, even excited about their job, is that, the behavior and motivational factor to achieve a high level of performance is high. It is described as job or work engagement. The engaged employee is the passionate employees, and the employees is totally immersed in his her work, energetic, committed, and completely dedicated. Those are engaged employee. The organizational engagement focuses on the attachment to or identification with the organization as a whole. Robinson et al. Of 2004 emphasized the organizational aspect of engagement when they are referred to as a positive attitude held by the employer records towards the organization and the value. If you can see the diagram, the components of employee engagement has a three interlapping, okay, regarded as the three overlapping components. You need to have motivation, you need to have commitment, and OCB, or the so-called organizational citizenship behavior. Only then, without engagement, you cannot bring these three factors together, because the among the three, the common midpoint is engagement. A model of engagement containing these components is given in uh in the figure 3.2. What are the drivers of employee engagement? When you challenge people, when you give them additional work or challenging job, it's one. Autonomy, meaning to say you have the freedom and independence and discretion to allow to employees how they will do the work, how they will, they have the freedom to work, freedom of expression. Variety, that's part of the employee engagement. There's a different types of job that you can perform and do at the same time, a lot of activities. Feedback, you allow people to voice out, employee voice, to get clear information. Fit, the existence of compatibility between an individual and work environment is when you hire people who are strategically fit to do the job. You allow the individual to behave in a manner consistent with how they will see and want to see themselves. All right. Opportunities for development. This will make work meaningful because um, they provide pathways for employee growth and fulfillment. That is employees for development, rewards and recognition. These represent both direct and indirect returns on the personal investments and of one's time, and you are working out a work role in the organization. So those are drivers of employee engagement. If there are rewards and recognition, there are opportunities for development. They will send out for trainings. They're strategically fit. You can provide feedback. There's a lot of different skills that you can apply in performing your different functions in the job. You have the freedom, you have the jurisdiction, and you are challenged. Those are the things that you can do to make those people in the organization feel engaged. All right. Now, it has been said that, like factors that affect human behavior are based on behavioral thing. But if you do not know how to, like implement such, there is also a negative side of burnout of engagement. That is what you call burnout. You defined by Mashlak and Jackson of 1981 that there's a syndrome of emotional exhaustion and cynicism. Burnout can take place when individuals are placed under too much pressure to perform, and it is called sometimes disengagement. If you are burnout, do you like still to go whatever activities the company would go? Of course not. So, ladies and gentlemen, okay, these are the questions and uh, question and answer supposedly for chapter 3 review. You can take a photo of that. All right. And chapter 3 discuss about the factors affecting employee behavior. It is discussed the concept of motivation, commitment, and engagement. And it says that employee becomes more motivated if they're given development opportunities. And employees become committed if they are given the right learning opportunities. And employees will become more engaged if they are given the right training. So moving on, every organization needs plans and actions for learning and development, in which chapter 4 will discuss all about that. So for now, folks, this is the discussion for chapter 3. And I hope you have a good day. And thank you so much for tuning in, because I know that, only you yourselves know if you are listening or not. So see you next Friday. Have a good day. God bless us all. Good night. Bye bye all.